Hello, everybody. Welcome to your literary happy hour, Writers Drinking Whiskey. I am your host, William R. Hincy, and I am honored and thrilled today to have author extraordinaire Ken Liu with me. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bill. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I am super stoked. Like we had talked, pregame here. I'm a big fan. I love the Dandelion Dynasty.
Thank you.
I do actually have. You have the two short stories. So actually, let's get to your introduction here and proper, because I think I wrote in my notes, but then I fumbled it. I wanted to say an author that needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway.
That's funny.
So you have the Silk Punk epic fantasy series, the Dandelion Dynasty. You have two short story collections. There's the Paper Menagerie and the Hidden Girl, and they're both and other stories. They're short story collections. It was your short story, I think it was the Paper Menagerie, if I can see my notes here. That one was the first story ever to win 3 genre awards, right? That was the Hugo, the Nebula, and the World Fantasy Awards.
That's right.
And you also consult on the history of bookmaking, futurism, machine augmented creativity, virtual reality, sustainable storytelling, and probably 86 other wonderfully smart, brilliant things that you do. Anything I missed? Anything you'd like to add?
No, that sounds like all the things that that sounds like all the things that I do that are presentable. So yeah.
That's a much longer list than for me. Like presentable is a sliding scale for some of us. So awesome. So I always like to get us started with kind of getting to know where you are in the world. So maybe you could tell us, just generally where you are and where's the best place to get a drink there.
Yeah, so I'm on the South Shore of Boston. So if you're, driving away from the city of Boston, you're driving towards the Cape, and I'm somewhere along the way. Now, in terms of drinks, I'm not a bar person. So I live in a pretty nice commuter suburb of Boston, basically. And as a parent, I don't really go out and get drinks anymore. So I'm not entirely sure of the bar scene around here. I do enjoy making coffee. And so, we've got our own little pour over coffee kit, and I grind the beans and everything in the morning. So, that's what I've got.
Very good.
And, I enjoy that. And, once in a while, after a day's work in the word mines, I do enjoy having a whiskey or a drink of whiskey or so. But that's my drinking game.
Very good. Fair enough. Yeah, so that people know we're recording this 12 o'clock your time, 9 o'clock my time. So
right, we're not getting drunk yet. A little bit early in the day.
Yeah. Even I'm notorious for it. And I just have my coffee and my protein shake here. So you got to start the day. You got to start the day right.
You got to start the day. Yeah.
Very good. Awesome. So what I thought might be fun then, because everyone likes to talk about the hero's journey, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is fun, but I want to do one author style. So I thought we could I have the beats down here. I thought we could kind of go through.
This is pretty cool, actually. I like that. I like this approach.
Yeah. Awesome. So we will start with the first one here. So I know some of the answers, but let's start with the ordinary world, right? The first speed here. So maybe you could tell us about your career prior to setting out as an author.
So I've had a pretty varied career, I would say. I started out as a software engineer, and I worked at Microsoft and also at a startup here in Massachusetts for a number of years before I went to law school and became a corporate lawyer. And I practiced law with the firm for, again, a number of years before moving into litigation consulting, which is sort of a combination of my two previous careers, where I essentially analyzed software and hardware and wrote reports to explain to the jury and the judge how a piece of technology worked for patent, copyright, trade secret cases, things like that. But throughout this, I would say, journey of 12, 14 years, something like that, I was always publishing as well. So my publishing career sort of started out very small, a trickle, and then just kept on building. Basically, throughout the time I was a software developer and a lawyer, I just never stopped writing really and publishing. A story here, a story there. Eventually, around the time when my two kids were born, or just when they were still babies, I had built up enough of a publishing backlog that I wanted to try to make the jump towards full-time writing. And so that's when I did it. I took the plunge of going full-time. And I've been doing it since. It's been, again, a number of years now since I've been a full-time writer. And I love it. This is my favorite job so far because it doesn't feel like a job. I mean,
Sure.
no one tells me when to go to work and whatnot. And I get to make my own hours, and I get to decide on my own schedule. I get to pick projects I want to work on. So yeah, it's pretty darn cool. But I did build it up slowly. I mean, as I
Sure.
mentioned, it took a long time to get to this point. So in some sense, you can mark the beginning of my writing career from the moment when I quit my job and became a full-time writer. But I think it's more accurate to think of it as this very tiny little trickling beginning that got built up over, 2 decades
Right.
before I got to this point.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I'm actually right on the precipice of that. So I mentioned before the show, I was in Tijuana all week for work. This was kind of the last big thing I'm doing for the day. I'm a director of quality regulatory for a medical device company. And so I had a new manufacturing plant down. So I went down and, audited the new plant and things and was down for a couple of days. End of June is my last day. And that's the same thing. I've been, trickling, publishing short stories.
Congratulations! You're finally getting there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what was your journey like? I mean, how like did you always, write the whole time, or like did you start at some point?
Yeah, no, I started when I was younger. I really liked writing and acting, right? And then I had my first daughter young. I was 20. I was a single dad and things. So trying to act and going, especially because I was doing a lot of like community theater, things like that. It's all evenings and stuff. So it's like, it's just tough. I couldn't do it. And I liked writing anyway. So I kind of got to be all of the characters and kind of act it through. So it was a lot of short stories at first. You publish short stories, the literary journals, here and there. And then I had one short story that was about a time with my wife where we had the book is called But the Ripping Apart. And it was about a real event where we went to check on her old school, third grade school teacher. And she was a hoarder and she was, an alcoholic. She was having some real problems. And my wife hadn't heard from her. And she was like, this is pretty early on us dating too. She's like, will you go with me? Cause I'm just worried that, what I'm going to find. And we had gone, and that event I thought I was going to write a little short story just about that day. And it just kind of grew. And I was like, oh, I actually have to write this, out as a novel. So I did that. So I've been writing, and juggling that, and I homeschooled my son. So just always been juggling. So it's going to be fun to be writing. And I guess if you want to call this podcasting or whatever.
Oh, that is really cool. Congratulations. That's a great moment. And also, what struck me about that is the path that we both took, which is, to start out in short stories and before novels. That's increasingly rare, is my feeling, right? More and more people are not really going that way. I don't know why I went that way. I mean, I guess it just felt like, when I was working, I didn't really have the time or the concentration to be able to do a novel, but I could fit in a short story because you can hold it out in your head. That was the reason I did it. I don't know if that's similar to you, but writing a novel is something that took me some time to build up to because I couldn't really, I didn't have the ability to hold something sustained while I was working a full-time job, so yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I hear you. And then now you've gotten to Dandelion Dynasty, which is, do you have any idea how many words it
I
is
don't.
altogether?
It's more than a million. I don't know exactly how long. I do know that it took me a decade to write. So on average, more than 100,000 words a year, which I think is decent. I think that is basically what novelists do. So it's a nice average pace. It just took me a very long time to write that one thing. I mean, other people have 10 books out during that time. I have only one
Sure.
series, so it's not. I don't know quite what to think about that. I joke with my agent sometimes that even though he and I have been working for so long, he has really sold just this one thing for me. And I'm not a very good client. I mean, he's done other deals for me, but in terms of like actual big things, this is it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I don't know quite what to think about that. I mean, a decade of your life in one thing is just a lot of investment in one thing. Other than kids,
Sure.
I don't know of anything else.
Yeah, right. Like your kids and your mortgage. You're like, how? That's funny. I know how you feel though, because the book I just finished that I'm going to be trying to shop here, actually after June when I can focus on it full time, was that it's called Pirates of Appalachia. It's an epic absurdist satire.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
And it's, I think, what did I top out at? It's about 240,000. But that's taken me over. Yeah, and that's taken me over, over 10 years. I've done things in between and I've been working full time and everything else. But it wasn't until I started working at home full time where I could carve out that time every morning to work at it that I was able to really do it, because it's holding it in your head. I was like, okay, it's so hard to like hold all these, strings together. So
yeah.
I think it's cool when people do that, though. I think that's when you get the true magic happens.
I mean, how does it feel now that it's? I mean, I assume you're actually done, right? At this point, the
done,
drafting is done. So, like, how does that feel?
I don't know. I'm a weird bird. I don't know. I'm happy, but it's like I already started the next thing. I'm like, oh, okay, this other. I had all these ideas. I'm juggling which one I want to start, and then one of them kept popping up more, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, so I think you're much smarter than I am. You have the right attitude. Like, you're like, it's done now. I'm moving on to the next thing. I mean, if there's one thing I can say, it's like I think that's the right attitude, right? Because for everything in your writing career, the solution to all writing problems, I would say, is just to write another story or another book, right? So, like the healthiest attitude is, I'm done with this thing. Okay, let's move on to the next exciting thing. I had to wait a few years because it was so all-consuming, and I didn't really have any room for anything else. So it took me actually a couple years to just sort of get out from under the shadow of finishing that series. But now I'm working on something new too again. So it's very exciting. I wish I had, been like you, had other things that I went on to immediately, but I didn't. But now that I do have something I'm working on again, it's very exciting and very cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, I think it just goes by person, right? I think we, especially writers, because it's so much of it is lonely. Right. It's like you at a keyboard doing this thing. It's so easy to kind of like, I do it all the time. I'm like, did I really just spend, I think I did write down the other day, I think it's 14 years on this. I'm like, is this just madness? Like, is anyone going to rather read this? Did I really just do this? Like, so I think it's easy to kind of be hard on yourself, but you got to kind of find that. Like, I try very hard to think of everything as like a journey, right? Like the destination for all of us is death, right? That's where we end up. So I'm like, everything's interlude. Like just focus on this. Some days it's easier than others, some days it's I'm feeling good and I'm like, okay, yeah, go do this thing. Other days I'm like, I'm just having a drink of whiskey. I don't know what to do from here. So what inspired, was it always the plan to start writing full time? Or was there kind of a call to action?
That's a call to action. My God, no, it's not. It's not. I wouldn't say it's in the plans. I mean, so this is funny, right? Because what you're doing here is really fascinating to me. This whole idea of asking the writer to explain their own journey. So I have a theory that most things that happen in our lives are actually just random, right? So most choices
Sure.
we end up making, like who we marry, what profession we pick, where we get our house. I mean, it's just like, I think a lot of that is actually random, or at least randomness and chance play a much bigger role in these things than we'd like to admit. But we are not built that way. Like, we humans are just not built that way. We don't like um, things to be random. So we like to think of things based before how things are, and we want to. Um, so I could give you a shape narrative and give you an arc about how I ended up here, but I think the real right answer is it was kind of random.
Sure.
I think there were multiple inflection points in my life where I could have gone down any number of different paths, and I ended up picking this particular path. And it's not a conscious plan that I'm striving towards or anything. I think I would have been happy doing any number of things. Writing and storytelling is just one of the things I wanted to do. But and then people would have said, you know, oh, he wrote stories. Like, I have a friend who keeps on telling me the story that I have no memory of, that she claimed that when we were all in middle school together, I wrote the story that everyone's unimpressed by. I have literally no recollection of this. So I'm not entirely sure that it actually happened. She insists that it did happen. But, you know, it's the sort of thing where if I wanted to, I could string together, like, I did want to do this all the time. But I think, honestly, what feels subjectively true to me is, no, going full time is just one of those things that ended up being the best choice at that point in life. It was not something I don't think I felt the call to do just this one thing as most. What about you? I mean, did you always feel the call that you wanted to go?
You know, I would probably say yes. I think in the sense that I always wanted to do something creative, right? Mm-hmm. So when I got into what I was doing, like I mentioned, I was a single dad. So, and I was always, I was never married. I have two daughters, so we're mine, hers, his. If that's the old show, I always get it mixed up. But I had Rhiannon, my oldest daughter, who actually one of these whiskeys. I'm right in front of it, but one of the whiskeys, it's like a Welsh whiskey here. Nice. That's her name, if you can see it on there. But nice. That was my oldest daughter. So I had her when I was 20. Cassidy, we had, I think it was like 18 months later. But it was like, I got, creative stuff is great, but it doesn't always pay, right? So it's how do I do it? So I was going to school to be a teacher because I'm thinking I'll go be a teacher. I'll be on their same schedule. This will make life, easier for us. And then my creative pursuits I can do on the summers, right? 2 months off, lots of other like weeks off, 2 weeks for this. So I can kind of fit it in. In the course of that, though, I started working in like a corporate job because it had health benefits. Yes. So then I have health benefits. I'm doing this, and I bore easily. So, and my bosses kind of learned this, that it was, you could just throw stuff to him. So I think sometimes they were just giving me their work. They're like, hey, you want to do this? And it was something new for me to figure out. So I enjoyed it. So that's what I started doing. And then after a while, I was doing so well. Then that's where I met my wife. Was Medtronic is the name of that place. And I was doing so well that we ended up getting married. She was married previously, had a daughter. That's hers. So we have Rhiannon, Cassidy, and now Michaela. And we're getting married, and then we bought a house. So again, getting back to your randomness, the reason we are in Glendora, about 25 miles from LA. The reason we ended up here was we would go visit her cousin, and her cousin was the husband, so Jen and James, we'd go visit them. And we would exit the freeway in Glendora. And it's right by the mountains and things. So to position it for you is where Pasadena is along the mountains. We're like 10 miles like east of Pasadena along the same San Gabriel Mountains here. And I'm like, if we're going to move down there, I don't, because I was at Palmdale, I was out high desert. I'm like, I don't want to be in the middle of everything. If the mountains are at least there, I know I can get to them and hike and ride my bike or whatever. So we're like, I was like, Glendora seems really nice. But Jen and James didn't live in Glendora. They lived in Covina. Like, so it's just that we exited there. And so we ended up here mostly because of an exit where we were like, oh, that looks nice, you know? Never had been to the city, actually. I mean, we drove through it, I suppose, but, you know, never had actually spent time here. But, you know, so I did that for a long time, you know, and kind of rode the career and did enjoy it at the time. I mean, sometimes corporations get a little like, it's like, oh, now we have a layoff and now we've sold to a new company and things. It does start to get emotionally a little just hard to kind of commit to. So, but the plan was always to do something creative. This show, I would have never said I was going to be doing a YouTube show. I never thought was going to be in the cards. So, you know, it's kind of yes and no. It's like I always wanted to do something creative. I've always loved writing and things. I really wanted to follow that. But it's been, you know, a snaking path and 80 other different things.
Yeah, that I think actually is probably a very accurate description of all of us. I mean, we may have some big high-level yearnings, right, that we sort of think that that we want. I mean, but things like that take together. It's whatever. And then you end up with a pretty cool shape in the end. You didn't contemplate it. It's fun.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it was. It was funny when I first got. So what happened with the corporate gig actually was that they converted my salary completely under this project to move that manufacturing plant there. So the plant was in China. They're moving it to Tijuana, where we already have one plant. So they're building the second one. And they converted my salary completely under that. And about a year and a half ago, the CEO calls me for something else, and we're chatting. And he goes, "Oh, and you know that we converted your salary completely under that project." I'm like, "No, I didn't know."
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just an accounting thing. And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, just an accounting thing." And I tell my wife right after, I'm like, "Yeah, so when the project's over, like that's it, you know."
Yeah.
And so my boss confirmed that probably about a month ago or so now. He goes, "Oh, well, you know, I just found out it was this." And I'm like, "Well, I've known because I was told."
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But I didn't know the date. But he was like, "Okay, so like into June, you know, will be the end." So I was like, "Okay." So, but it was good in the effect that actually that was the kick, you know, out the door. We've already been planning on it. I already knew kind of this was coming up. I just thought there was a little more runway than what was there. But it was stressful for like a week and a half. I was like, okay, you know what? I should just go find another job. I don't want to be like the guy that's not contributing to the family or just, you know, kind of off doing this. My wife was completely okay with it. She wanted me to, you know, to go forward with it.
Your thing, yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, after about a week and a half, I was like, okay, the kind of excitement kicked in. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Some of it's just dumb luck, right? You don't know it's getting in the right place, the right time, all of that. But I'm like, you know what? I'm good. Let's go try it. And things don't work out. Who knows? I mean, I didn't expect to be where I am now. So
I'm with you. I feel like a lot of times, you know, we tell these very romantic stories about what a struggle it is to make it at the fighter. But, you know, at some point, you have some savings, you know, trying to do it now is very different from trying to do it back when you were 20, right? I mean, it's a very different time. And there's, you are prepared. It's not empty. And things will happen, and some good things and bad things, and you just have no idea where it's going to take you. And it is an adventure, and I hope you have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I hope so. So maybe what we could do though, because I know we want to have about a half hour-ish left, and I have to get. So I always say with the show that with a name called Writers Drinking Whiskey, I'm like ethically mandated to talk some writing.
Yes. The thing that writers really don't love doing, or most of us. I mean, or we love some part of it, but not all of it. But anyway, yeah.
Right. Well, I actually started branching out with some open bar episodes that are mostly talking writing, strictly for that, because I'm like, I could go the whole show and not talk writing at all and go. So actually before we do that, because there's two questions, one of my favorite things to talk about, and I have no idea, maybe because I'm a masochist, it's just failure and like how we like overcome it. So was there any points like in your, and actually you can even go back to the lawyer career anywhere you want, but any points where you kind of experienced like a big failure and you had to kind of overcome from there?
Well, there's a lot of that. I mean, I feel like I actually have this presentation I give, which is called, how to fail gracefully, which is probably my one bit of career advice, which is that you're going to fail all the time, and you just have to kind of be okay with it. A lot of careers are like that. I mean, being a baseball player, you fail more than you succeed. That's about it. That's why the batting average is what it is. A lot of things in life are like that. You fail a lot more than you succeed, whatever that. It's like, well, however successful is defined for you. But I had a bunch of specific instances where that happened, and I had to learn how to deal with it. One thing early on was when I first started writing, there was, I had beginner's luck. The first 2 or 3 stories I wrote seriously got accepted by fairly good markets. So I was very, really excited about, where this was going. So I wrote another story, which I thought was the best thing I've ever written. I sent it out to the top tier markets who all rejected it. And that sort of put me into a bad spiral. So instead of doing the thing we were talking about, which is to write more stories, I kind of got obsessed with that one story. This is something that artists often do, which is because they put a lot of themselves into that piece of art, they think the rejection of the piece is a rejection of them, and that they think that the rejection by the market is necessarily a rejection of the artistic merit. I actually wrote a story about this. It's called The Passing of the Dragon, which is very much about this whole idea that art is not a communicative act. When people are responding to a piece of art, they're responding really to both the things that they can see in there, but also to themselves. It's not a response to you. The things that you put in there, only you know you put in there. Other people don't. And when they're responding to it, they're not really responding to you. They're just responding to what's actually on the page. Art is not a communicative act, which sounds paradoxical, but it's true. And so when your art is rejected, it's not a rejection. A piece of art that you have created has value, even if no one else responds to it. Whether some market wants to buy it or whether some patron wants to support you, those are sort of irrelevant. They're just not relevant. We live in the market economy, and so we have been trained from birth to value the idea that other people will pay for something as value. And again, if something sells a lot of copies, that's all it means. It sold a lot of copies. It doesn't mean it's actually artistically worth more or less than something that has sold 0 copies. So anyway, those are lessons that I did not know at the time. And so I decided that it wasn't worth writing anymore, because if this particular story got rejected by so many markets, then it must be worthless. And therefore I was worthless. So I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I did stop actually writing for a while. I earlier said I never stopped writing. That's actually not true. There was a period of time where I stopped writing altogether. And what eventually changed things was I got this email forward to me from a friend announcing for submission for anthology, and that anthology was themed around the idea of story that could be rejected. So, I've seen my message from the library story, and it was accepted, and it got me excited about reading again. But here's the thing. The real lesson is, number one, whether people like or dislike your work, it has nothing to do with artistic work. And number two, when people approve or reject a piece of art, they're not approving or rejecting you. It's just not. They're rejecting something that they see, or they're approving something they see in there, and it's largely about themselves. So the solution to all writing problems, to all rejections, is to write another story. So the solution to all writing problems is to just write another book, or duration of your existence. You need to choose to do something with that time that will make sense to you as a story. And if you choose to practice art, then you need to be intrinsically motivated. You can't make the practice of that art dependent on other people's approval. So that's kind of the thing I got out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I think it makes sense too. I tend to, in the building of an individual book, or a story, I think there's a bit of that's just laying brick, right? Like you just got to get out and do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think of it as like a career, as like your life, there's still a bit of laying brick, but it's kind of each book is those bricks, and that wall is going to be that career you put together. And yeah, one of them's not, perfectly parallel or whatever you might want. You just keep, you have to keep going. So yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. Thank you for that. Awesome. So let's. I suppose now we should actually get to the writing talk.
Actually, I have a writing question that I wanted to ask you, but I think would be fun to talk about.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, because I think a lot of times when writers talk about this stuff, we talk about very craft level stuff. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's really fun, but I want to ask a slightly different question, which is, if you were, what is the one thing about your own writing that you think you're really good at and that you're super proud of? Like, what is that thing?
So you have to realize, okay, so I was born in West Virginia. My family's like Western Pennsylvania. We're like West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, like Appalachian. Like the idea of being super proud of yourself was not something.
Exactly. It's not, I'm going to force writers to do this. What is the, because you know what? Here's my deal. Like, this is something that I said, man, police. So I think writers deep down need to be arrogant. So, because think about it, writers are pretty big assholes. Right? The thing that we do is really, really demanding on the reader, right? Like, photographers, you can take in their photo in like a second. Similarly, right? Musician, you sit there for a couple minutes and you got their song, right?
Yeah.
Even a movie, like 2 hours, and you're done. And during that time, they're trying to entertain you with all kinds of stuff. Writers are big assholes, right? The things that we create take hours and hours to consume. And the reader has to do all the freaking work. The reader has to do all the work. So unless you're a pretty arrogant person deep down, you cannot be a writer, because you're saying, my stuff is so valuable that I'm going to make you spend hours in your life to consume the thing that I produce. So I think deep down, all writers are a little bit arrogant. I want to hear about what is something they're really proud of that they do. Why do they think they do? What is this thing they do that is actually really good?
Right. Well, you know what it is, though? I think what drew me to writing more than it's almost my self-therapy. Right, like it's almost most of my things actually come from some kind of trauma, anyways, and that's how I work through it. I think what the arrogance with me is maybe just more that I'm incorrigible, right? Like, so
I love it.
Yeah, my wife actually jokes about that. We joke about it. We've been married. My son's 13, so we're going on 14 years here. And she goes like, I didn't even know we were dating. Like, I thought we were just going out like we were just this friends doing things.
Oh,
so yeah, I thought we were dating for like a year, like this whole time, But like I'm persistent, So I do think there's. Well, let's see what. I don't know that I've just thought of it in terms of a particular thing, but I believe if I set my mind to something that like. It just doggedly. I wish I could remember the line. There's a character in Pirates of Appalachia that I used the line on, but I was thinking of it through me, and I was like, oh, that's actually perfectly Cole's the character's name. But it's like dogged determination and a willingness to suffer. So that's what I think it is. Is like I am very willing to suffer in what it needs to do. I'm willing to do that hard thing and willing to get beat down and do sort of things.
That is no joke. 14 years.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
And just that doggedness. I think if there's anything I do well, it's that is probably the biggest thing. Because I know people said, oh, your descriptions are so great. It's really, I have a hard time. Like they're just the describing things. That's the chore when I'm writing. And maybe because I end up spending more time on it, like it comes out, but it's like I don't feel like that's like so great.
That's actually rare where you spend time on something and the readers actually notice it. I mean, you know how it is. Most of the time, like the writers obsess over certain things, and the readers are like, whatever.
Exactly. We talked about that at one of the open bars, the writing rules I'll bring up. Like, it's like, only use said, right? And I'm like, at the end of the day, readers don't care. Use said, exclaimed, whatever. Like, this is just stuff writers have.
I will say that I do notice when some writers going overboard with the ejaculated and all this stuff. I'm not thinking, okay, come on, buddy. Like, most of the time, if you're just being, said he, said she, I don't care. It's fine.
Yeah. Sure. So actually, what I was hoping to ask you about then, because I thought you would have a really interesting perspective on this, was AI with writing. Oh, yeah. Right? So, so I know one of the things like machine augmented creativity was how it was put. So maybe just, very open ended. Just maybe what are your thoughts on AI writing?
Quite a few things here. This can go on for hours if you let me go, but I'll try to restrain myself. So a little bit of background here. I've been actually interested in this subject ever since I was in college. Before this current craze with generative AI. So let's just put ChatGPT and DALL-E and all this stuff out of your mind. Just think back to things 20 years ago, right? Even 20 years ago, right? More than 20 years, my gosh. Even back then, computers have significantly changed the practice of most arts, right? My wife is a photographer, and photographers have weathered the storm of Photoshop. And the kind of things that computers can do for them in the practice of their art. And today, think about the extent to which a machine-crafted version of the portrayal of reality. It's very different from what you think a photograph actually is. In that naive, it's just chemistry and physics giving you a reflection of reality type of thing. But writers have pretty much basically done their work the same way since the time of, Jane Austen and even before, right? We may be typing as opposed to writing longhand, but fundamentally, every word comes out of our own minds. Versions of generative AI and whatever you want to say about it, there's no question that it's posing a huge threat to certain kind of jobs that traditionally have been viewed as very creative, like graphic designers and copywriting. These are all professions in which I would argue that because the creative problem they're trying to solve is fundamentally one of optimization, meaning there's a very clear, specific ideal that the person who's hiring you to do has in their minds, and they just want you to iterate until that vision is fulfilled. When that is the model for the job, machines will eventually beat you. Because if it's an optimization problem where the creativity is subservient to the ultimate vision of the person demanding it, the artist's role is going to be limited, and eventually machines will replace them. So if that is the vision of it, then I think the way to think about AI's impact on art is to think through what exactly is your ideal for that particular art, right? So to explain this a little bit better, I'll use an analogy, right? So this is hardly the first time that machines have done some kind of posed some kind of challenge to human craft and human creativity. We've had multiple instances of this. A lot of people don't know this, but when Gutenberg first introduced the printing press to Europe, that a machine printed book was, in some ways soulless, and that a human copyist elevated the book. Now, that idea to us in the post-mechanical reproduction age, I think a lot of us would feel the argument is ridiculous, because what a book is fundamentally has changed for us. We think a book is an abstraction, is something independent of the embodiment in which it exists. But, that was not always the case. But anyway, so that's one example. But photography is probably the most interesting example. The camera was a thing that purported to portray nature, which was what artists had always done, right? So if you read traditional accounts of photography, they often include some sort of paragraph about how photography posed a threat to artists and in fact destroyed the jobs of some artists, and they'll use portrait painting as an example or something like that. It turns out that most of these accounts are unfounded. There's no evidence to support the notion that portrait painters were somehow replaced, largely because, very few artists made a living by painting portraits to begin with. It was mostly done as an amateur thing.
And if you had the money that could pay someone to paint the family portrait, you would still do that today because you still have that money.
That's exactly right. The people like Hincy who painted portraits, they continued to be paid. But here's the thing. There was a group of artists whose jobs were entirely displaced by the camera and who lost their art. Like there was an entire art form that was completely destroyed. This is an art form that most of us don't even think about today. I'm talking about engraving. Engravers were entirely replaced by cameras. So engravers were incredibly important because prior to the invention of photography, if you wanted your artwork to be widely disseminated, it had to be printed. So how do you turn a painting or a drawing into a printing plate? Well, another artist had to be hired to translate your two-dimensional setting into this three-dimensional plate. This was a separate artistic profession who had to do this work. This was an incredibly rich, creative field of human craft. But then the camera was invented, and now you can do things like photolithography, which is not the same thing as most people think of it as, this process for making computer chips. That's not what I'm talking about. The words are similar and the principles are similar, but this is very different. It's the idea of using a photoresist and then projecting a photographic image onto it so that the exposed parts can be then washed away. So you have a mechanical reproduction of the image that can then be used for printing. I would argue that in order to understand the impact of AI on the creative fields, you have to sort of think through this. Why was engraving because as an artistic pursuit, its highest ideal is the reproduction of some other original image. Its highest ideal is how closely could it replicate some idealized image. If your art can be defined in that manner, meaning graphic design, copywriting, then I think you are at risk because you are much more like an engraver than other types of art in which you're not subject to that. So I think that's a good way to think about it. So in terms of writers, is your writing, is the kind of thing you're writing something that is subject to optimization to the fulfillment of a particular ideal? Or is your art, or you're writing something where even you don't know what is? There are certain genres of writing, let's say. So I'll give an example. I used to read these Dungeons and Dragons tie-in books when I was a kid. I read dozens of them, and they have a very specific formula. They have to have a party composed of these kind of characters. They have to go on an adventure, and there's a very clear formula for how they're done. And I think those books are judged by how well they executed that particular model. The artistic ideal is judged by how well they can optimize and execute a particular specific, narrowly well-defined, narrowly and well-defined standard. But other genres, the sort of thing where, for lack of a better term, where originality is valued, however you define that. But you know what I mean. Like it's the sort of thing where you as a reader don't really know what you want. And the writer ends up giving it to you anyway. Those kind of things, I think, are much more amenable to continued human success. So I suspect that there will be genres of writing where humans will just simply compete because it's not possible for us to compete, nor interesting for us to compete against machines. So we will migrate elsewhere. That's my opinion, and that's my feeling. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting about AI is I do a lot of advising AI with writers, organizations, and things like that. And one thing that I consistently sort of try to point to is we really have to think about AI as a possible tool that will make our art more interesting rather than as competition. I personally think this whole trend of using AI to lie to people, the fact that AI can sometimes fool people into thinking it was done by a human is 100% not interesting. And I don't believe there's any future to that. It's just a transitional thing, something that we do well because, a dog can dance. Okay, it's a novel. Who cares? The real interesting thing has to come from later when we actually figure out what AI is good for, in the same way that artists figure out what the camera is good for. And I think, again, there are really interesting analogies to be made here. I can't go through the whole thing, but essentially, if you trace the history of the 19th century, artists eventually figure out all sorts of interesting things. For example, visual arts were heavily influenced by what photography could reveal. And ultimately, the camera pushed artists into abstraction, into viewing light and shadow as proper subjects in themselves, which are very interesting. I'm not entirely sure those movements would have occurred without photography displacing visual arts from a lot of the representational uses. And then finally, the most exciting field is where the camera became a tool to allow entirely new forms of art, like cinema and TV and TikTok. The aesthetic of cinema is a whole new grammar. And it would not have been possible without the camera. And some of the aesthetics of cinema are now carried to their extremes in YouTube Shorts and TikTok. If you view these things, you have to learn a whole new grammar to be able to interpret them. Because, again, it's like, how could people tell the story this way? Many of these YouTube Shorts rely for their dramatic effect on you knowing hundreds of other clips. If you didn't have that context, none of these would be interpretable. So much of the YouTube Short aesthetic is based on editing and very advanced editing techniques that are only possible in this age of ubiquitous cheap computing. So my thinking here is, what are the potential equivalents to the cinema, to TV, to new forms of dramatic storytelling with AI, right? Humans being able to work with AI, humans working with cameras invented entirely new dramatic forms. What are the new forms of storytelling and other things that we can do with AI working with humans? Like, I can't even imagine. The earliest attempts of motion pictures were terrible, right? But it took a century of publication before we got to the point where they could actually genuine art. That's the same thing that's happening like video games. I think video games are finally getting to that point where we're creating genuine pieces of art. Right now, the most interesting game art pieces are still very cinematic. But I think we're going to move away from that. We're going to develop our own grammar and genre of interactive storytelling that will actually be very potent. And I think AI will have a large role in that. I think AI will allow us to do things that individual human storytellers can never do in games. So I don't know exactly what that will look like, but I'm super optimistic about all of that. And then one last thing, which is, I wish a lot of these companies that are spending all their energy developing AI to be able to generate stuff for you, I don't care about that. That's actually not interesting to me. I would much rather have AI be a good critique partner, somebody who would look at my stuff and say, this is not making sense based on what happened in chapter X. This is a place where you should do more because this is a perfect opportunity to do. Humans will write better stories when an AI can go over their work and point out all the flaws. I think that would be incredibly valuable, interesting, and exciting. But so far that does not seem to be the focus on a lot of the AI work, and it's very disappointing. And then, I also have this vision that I think would be really cool to train AI to understand your taste and to discover works of art that would be appealing to you, that are uniquely appealing to you. A lot of times our recommendation algorithms are based on the idea that if a lot of other people have bought this thing, you might like it too. It's the popularity thing where, the rich get richer. It's not just one or two mega stars that absorbs all the oxygen, sucks all the oxygen out of the room, but rather, each unique piece of art is presented to the one or two readers who are perfect for it. And you would have this wonderful match between the perfect book with the perfect reader. So yeah, I know that's a lot, but that's some of the stuff that I think about.
No, I think that was great. But I really loved the way you equated it to like a different grammar, because my son will do that. I was wondering. I about this. I forget who I was chatting with, but I was like, what's the cultural touch points, now, right? It used to be like TV or movies, right? Everyone would kind of know the reference mostly. That's kind of started to fade. And then, watching my 13-year-old, I'm like, oh, there's like certain memes that all our friends know, all these things. I'm just not, I don't know the touch points, but they'll show me like a little like TikTok video or a YouTube short or something. And I don't always get it. Right. And I'm like, oh, but it's like a whole new grammar. It's that I missed it.
I think in some ways, these new forms of art are much more like oral storytelling than they are like traditional literary storytelling. I mean, a lot of this requires a huge amount of context and immediate context. Unless you consumed a lot of the stuff already in that moment, the new one will not make sense to you. I mean, these are responses to responses to responses to responses. You really have to have the whole conversation before you can make sense of it. It's kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I always call it last call. Anyone watching, you don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. So if there was something you could tell the young Ken Liu, one thing to kind of help you on your journey, it doesn't have to necessarily be your writing journey, just life journey here, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I think this will sound a little bit cliche, but I think it's actually still good advice, which is all the stuff that you're so worried about right now, the grades and the test and whether you said the right thing in front of that person or whatever, none of that actually matters. It really doesn't matter. It's not going to matter, and you're not even going to remember it. But this one fun thing you're doing right now with your friends, this one moment you're spending with your grandparents, try to remember everything you can about it, because those are the memories that will come back to you over and over again, and they sustain you.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you again, so much for coming on. It was a blast getting a chance to talk, and really interesting hearing all your thoughts on AI and things too, because so many writers just go shrieking away. So that was really great. If people want to get to know more about you, I have the website already linked that I'll keep with the description. Anywhere else they should go to find you?
That's pretty much it. If they go to my website, they should sign up for my newsletter. That's where I announce new projects and stuff. And that's probably the best way to keep up with things that I do. But yeah, thank you very much, Bill. This was such a pleasure. Really fun.
Extra shot question for the audience. What is your favorite fantasy series? Let us know in the comments section here. I will include mine as well. It may, in fact, be Ken's that we just had on, because, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I am a big fan and love the book series. So let us know that down there in the comments section. And as always, if you do want to support the show, very best way is to pick up a book. So if you want to pick up one of Ken's books, one of my books, one of the previous guests, all of that goes a long way to help us kind of support this ecosystem of writers drinking whiskey together and talking about the said books that you've helped us produce. So thanks so much for all of your support. If you're watching, sticking through all of it with us, you have a great day, and stay saucy, everybody. Cheers.